course, at the end of October, we think of Halloween. The nights are getting darker, and our thoughts turn to everything ghoulish and haunted during this month. But you may be surprised to know that most Mainers paid very little attention to Halloween until the 20th century. The fact is, before then, people didn't need a holiday to talk about ghosts and the supernatural. Any long, idle evening would suffice. If you live in Maine, I'm sure you know a few legends from around the state, and many more from your hometown. For this edition of our Maine Almanac, we have a poem, a song, and a story, all with a supernatural theme. Our poem takes us to Perry, Maine, and to Red Island. This red rock, with a patch of grass sticking out of the water off of Birch Point, is hardly an island. But according to the author of our poem, Dr. John C. Rogers of Pembroke, it is the site of Captain Kidd's buried treasure. William Kidd was a famous privateer born in Scotland in 1655 and executed in 1701. He was a pirate hunter who later turned to piracy himself, which led to his execution. He achieved legendary status, and there are many islands scattered up and down the U.S. coastline said to contain his buried treasure. It is unclear if Rogers intentionally put a local veneer on these other Captain Kidd stories, or if he heard it from the sailors of Cobscook Bay. If you've heard of this story, I'd love to know.
There's a rock in the Cobscook, they call it Red Isle, and the blue wavelets curl and break at its feet like the ripples that curl when a maiden doth smile, neath the arch of the cheeks where the rosy lips meet. And there, when the tempest sweeps fierce o'er the hill, and the hail and the winds lash the waves into spray, the mermaid's sweet voice, all plaintive and shrill, is heard o'er the waters as she sings her wild lay. And there, when the sunbeams fall bright on the bay, and the sea like a mirror reflects the blue sky, above and around it the seagulls do play, and the loon and the osprey high o'er it do fly. And the divers never dive near its steep rocky shore, and the seabirds ne'er alight on its bleak mossy crest, but around and above it they constantly soar, and far from its shelter they always do rest. 'Twas there Captain Kidd, when he roamed the broad sea, and preyed on the helpless that fell in his way, concealed his rich treasures, deep down 'neath a tree, that grew 'mong the shrubs where the flinder mice play. But ere he enclosed it within the dark ground, a maiden, a captive most comely and fair, he led from his ship to the newly made mound, and on it compelled her to kneel and to swear that a guard over the treasures should always prove true, that none might molest them or steal them away, till the sea ceased to mirror the sky deep and blue, and the waves on the rocks ceased to dash into spray. That her spirit should guard, both by day and by night, the treasures he gave her to guard and to keep, so long as the sun o'er the bay sheds its light, and the moon and the stars shine over the deep. And she shrieked and she trembled as she knelt on the mound, and she prayed and she wept and for mercy implored. But the hearts of the pirates who stood there around were as deaf to her cries as the breakers that roared. But the moon from the scene hid her face in a cloud, and the cloud dropped a tear on the maiden's pale cheek, as with hands wild extended she repeated aloud the words of the oath that the pirate did speak. Then kissing her fondly they struck off her head, and hied to the ship that laid moored in the bay, and crowding all canvas from the place sadly sped, o'er the ocean to wander in search of more prey. Since then, in the moonlight, on that isle sad and lone, can be seen a fair maiden, each night of the year, a-kneeling and watching, as cold as a stone, while the cloud just at 12 on her face drops a tear. There's a shriek and a gleam, and her head rolls away, down, down in a cave where the wild billows roar. And the men o'er the mound then her cold body lay, and the blood runs afresh down the rocks of the shore. Then a ship seemed to crowd all her canvas for sea, and the winds always favor her voyage along, while the sailors seem eager to crowd to the lee, and gaze on that isle as they chant a low song. And there on the mound, when the ship's out of sight, may be seen the fair maiden, dejected, forlorn, a-gazing a seaward through the mist of the night, and weeping and sighing until it is morn. And the loon laughs, a-mocking her deep plaint of woe, as she hears her sad moanings and sighs o'er the deep. And the boatmen, affrighted, in the night never go near that isle in its weirdness, but far from it keep.
One of the most iconic occupations in Maine is, of course, lumbering. And in the 19th century, lumbering was a notoriously dangerous job. Many people drowned when floating logs down the river from the woods to the sawmills in town. When there was a death, sometimes there was a song written about the person. The story of Lost Jimmy Whalen is an extraordinary example of one of these types of songs. As lonely I strayed by the banks of the river, I was watching the sunbeams as evening drew nigh. As onward I rambled, I spied a fair damsel. She was weeping and wailing with many a sigh, crying for one who now lies a-sleeping. She was crying for one that no mortal could save. As the dark rolling waters that roll all around him, as onward they sweep towards young Jimmy's grave. Darling, she cried, won't you come to my bosom and give me sweet kisses as oft times you gave? You promised to meet me, my darling, this evening. Oh, come to me, Jimmy dear, come from your grave. Slowly there rose from the depths of the waters a vision of splendor more bright than the sun, with rolls of crimson around him were shining. For to speak to this fair maid, these words he began. Why have you called me from realms of glory back to this world? I soon have to part, to fold you again in my strong loving arms, for to see you once more I have come from my grave. Jimmy, she cried, won't you tarry here with me, and never, no, never, no more from me part? Then with you, Jimmy, my darling, for to sleep with you down in your cold, silent grave. Still as you wander alone by the waters, I will ever be near you to guide and to save. I will ever endeavor to keep you from danger. I will guide you, my darling, from my silent grave. Adieu, then he said, and he vanished before her, and straight to the skies he did seem for to go, leaving this fair maid alone and distracted, weeping and wailing in sorrow alone. Our last ghost story also comes from the woods, and it deals with a bird, the gorby. These birds of the boreal forests of Maine and Canada are very tame and would often frequent lumber camps, even stealing food directly from the hands of the workers. Their antics provided great entertainment to the men during winter. Perhaps it was for this reason they were said to be the souls of dead lumbermen returning to be with their comrades. Author and Vermont lumberman Robert E. Pike tells us that woodsmen feared to harm this bird, believing that great misfortune would follow. Folklorist Sandy Ives, in the 1961 edition of the Journal of American Folklore, records numerous examples of a particular gorby story. They all vary from place to place, but most go like this. A cruel man at the lumber camp catches a gorby, and to the shock and horror of the rest of the camp, he plucks all the feathers off the bird and releases it into the cold winter night. The next morning, the cruel man wakes up with every hair in his body completely gone, never to grow back. The gorby nowadays is mostly referred to as the Canada jay. They are in the corvid family, along with blue jays, crows, and ravens. Like their relatives, they are very intelligent. Maine is at the southern tip of their range, and because of this, they are more common in the northern part of the state. John James Audubon says, "I have found this species of jay breeding in the state of Maine, where many individuals belonging to it reside the whole year, and where in fact so many as 15 or 20 may be seen in the course of a day." These birds are adapted to survive cold northern winters. They hide food in the fall throughout their territory, and because of their intelligence, they're able to recall where it is over the course of the winter. They are truly omnivores, eating almost anything, including insects, seeds, and carrion. Native Americans said they would eat moccasins, and the lumbermen said they even stole soap. Canada jays mate for life, and you can find them in groups of 3, the mated pair, and one of their offspring from the previous breeding season. They breed remarkably early in the spring, when there's still snow on the ground. Both parents will feed the brood and are even sometimes helped by the offspring of their previous brood. By late October, many of our summer birds are gone, but the Canada jay will be here, and it's a good opportunity to get to know this legendary forest bird. These are just a few examples of the rich tradition of ghost stories the people of Maine have been sharing for generations. We hope they help pass the time during the lengthening nights this fall.